I am Curran Bhatia, joined by Harvey Dock. You know Harvey Dock as a very experienced referee. He's been refereeing boxing matches for over 2 decades, involved in some of the biggest fights that we've seen in recent memory. And of course, Harvey, you had the assignment of Ryan Garcia versus Devin Haney. I want to talk to you about that and everything else. But first of all, how are you doing, my friend?
I am good. Good. Thanks for asking. I've been getting a lot of calls asking how I'm doing. I'm really fine. I'm doing well.
I'm sure that it's been an interesting time here, especially in the last week or so. So I wanted to talk to you about, of course, Devin Haney versus Ryan Garcia, and I wanted to ask you about the fight and your experience. Before we even do that, I know that there was, anywhere you read things on social media, articles, things like that, there's always people that come out with allegations, things like that, and just to clear the record, because it's important that you get to have your side of the story and you get to speak. Any kind of implication that you were, working with or favoring a fighter, whether it be Devin Haney or Ryan Garcia, I'm sure you've seen that kind of rhetoric and talk out there. So I wanted to give you a chance to respond before we even talk about anything else. Were you in favor of one fighter or another at all in this fight?
When I hear things like that, it's almost comical to me. I've been around this sport more than half my life, 35 years, and I haven't compromised my integrity up until now, so I'm not going to start. I'd rather walk away from the game before I start doing that. So to answer that, absolutely not. That's actually foolish, but almost comical to me. So that comes, I guess, with the territory. People make allegations, and no matter how outlandish they may be.
And let me just say, I've always said that being a referee in professional boxing, especially at this high of a level, the championship level, I've always said it's one of the most difficult jobs because you have to make split-second decisions. And it's easy for folks to sit back on their couch. I'm sure I'm guilty of this as well and say, oh, hey, that should have been called this way or that way. When you have the benefit of watching it play out, watching replay, watching it again, versus making those split-second decisions and being that third man in the ring when these two men are competing at such a high level. So I wanted to talk to you about the fight. When you first got this assignment, this is a huge fight. These fighters are both very popular. Devin Haney was undefeated coming into this fight. Ryan Garcia is extremely popular, only once beaten. So I'm sure you knew that this was a big fight, but you've refereed a lot of big fights. So getting this assignment, what were you feeling when you got this assignment, and where did it rank for you in terms of the big fights that you had gotten, that you had refereed?
I don't rank the fights. I just try and go out there and perform, a respectable job every time I'm out there. I don't rank the fights. I've said on other podcasts, I'm just as excited doing the 4-rounders as I am doing the 12-rounders. So I don't look at the fights any differently from my shoes, my perspective. So, but yeah, I mean, whenever I'm asked to do any assignment, it's an honor. I mean, referees are, we're in the hot seat a lot, but we also do it because we love it. So, I still love it just as much now as I did when I started my pro career 20 years ago.
You started in 2004, and I'm sure you have to be passionate about this sport to continue for as long as you did and have all these big name assignments that you've had throughout your career. With Ryan Garcia versus Devin Haney, I'm sure that in terms of the lead up to the fight, I'm sure you saw some of the things that were going on in terms of Ryan Garcia, let's call it erratic behavior. And I'm sure you were aware of these, that kind of behavior. Did that play a factor at all into just your mindset and preparation going into this fight, thinking, hey, okay, we're seeing what's going on with Ryan Garcia. Maybe this will play out in a certain way in the ring. Maybe I have to be, looking for things that could happen. Like, for example, if a fighter is acting erratic beforehand, maybe you're prepared for a DQ or something like that. With what was going on with Ryan, did that come into your thoughts at all as you prepared for this assignment?
Not at all. No way. My job is to handle whatever transpires in the ring. Whatever happens outside the ring is really none of my business. You hear things, there's things out there, but that plays no part in how I do my job.
And so this fight, was a huge moment, huge opportunity for you as a referee, and it was a huge treat for us as boxing fans. This was just a top of the top fight in terms of competition, in terms of young fighters in their prime. It's everything that we want. And so this fight started off, and in round one, actually 40 seconds in, Ryan Garcia landed a left hook that really rocked Devin Haney. You could see Devin Haney was visibly hurt. Your mind as a referee, you're the third man in the ring. I'm sure that you got a little alert there saying, hey, okay, I see a fighter landing a punch of significance. And I'm sure that's part of your duties as a referee, that, hey, I got to keep an eye on this, because you are always thinking about fighter safety, I'm sure. And you got to think about, if a fighter's hurt, at some point you may have to stop a fight. So I'm sure that moment in the beginning of the fight in round one got your attention, right?
Oh, for sure. You're on alert right away. When anybody's hurt, you're definitely on alert as an official. So, of course, yeah, it definitely got my attention. It got my antennas up. Let's make sure he's okay. And it wasn't long before I knew he was okay.
And Devin Haney did compose himself. And as the rounds went on, Haney did have success, a very technical style. He actually backed up Ryan a couple of times as well. One thing that we could hear you say on the broadcast, and if you watch it back, you were warning Ryan Garcia, you saying stay off his head. And it looked like, from my vantage point, what you meant by that was Ryan would almost put Haney in like a wrestling, like a headlock in a way. And it seemed like that was the instruction you were giving him, which is very common in boxing to give that instruction. Is that what you were telling Ryan early in the fight? Hey, don't give him like a headlock there.
Yeah, he definitely put him in a headlock. Sometimes it looked close to a choke at a couple of times, where I actually maybe once or twice grabbed Ryan's arm and put it from around Devin's neck. So yeah, that's certainly accurate on your part. You saw what was happening there, and yeah, I did warn Ryan a few times about that.
And that's a good call, because that isn't part of the rules of boxing, and we don't want to see someone get hurt, in that way, especially outside of the rules of boxing. As round 6 ended, one thing that we started to see, which was present in the fight, was Ryan Garcia turning his back in a way, almost like maybe like a shoulder roll, maybe to the side. And Devin Haney, as he should do, is continuing to throw. Some of those shots would be to the side, but depending on how far Ryan Garcia is twisting his back, some of those were hitting the back. So you had to make a quick judgment call in there in terms of what's allowed, what's not. Just give me your thoughts on that move by Ryan in terms of turning to the side or even back, and your thoughts on what's acceptable there in terms of a fighter targeting the side and sometimes the back. What's your mindset on that?
So here's the thing with the side, which some of those were, let's say, kidney punches. Yeah. But if the boxer turns, if he gives himself up in that way, then those shots become legal, as does a shot behind the head. To compare it to a headshot, when those guys are on the inside, if you throw a punch and it wraps around the boxer's head, that's clearly illegal. However, if the boxer turns, as Ryan demonstrated a few times that night, and he gives you that, then that's legal. That's a legal target area at that point. I still warned Devin at one point because it looked like he just about hit him in the spine, So I said, you can't hit him directly in the back there. But it was close, because most guys won't give up that much of themselves or give that much of the side target. So yeah, it's a little strange, but I thought Devin he hit the legal target, which was a lot of target, as Ryan turned himself almost completely around.
And as the fight progressed, of course, I think the most reviewed part of this fight, most talked about, was round 7. And that is when Devin Haney is dropped for the first time. And one thing is, I've seen a clip going around on social media where Devin's dropped, Ryan goes to the corner, and you are giving Devin the count, and you look over at Ryan and say, hey, go back to the corner. And Ryan did start to deviate from that neutral corner before the action started, and you kind of gave him a push back. This is very common in boxing because it is the rule in modern boxing that the fighter that knocks the other fighter down does have to go to the neutral corner and stay there until time is called in. It's not like the old days when, you can knock a guy down and stand over him and then just continue punching from there. You do have to start at the neutral corner. So from my vantage point, that looked like you did exactly what you were supposed to do. Do you remember that moment at all? And could you just walk me through it? Is that kind of how it went down?
Yeah. So the fighters, when they receive their instructions in the dressing room, they're informed, and these are 2 seasoned professionals, so they definitely know. But you also let them know again in the dressing room before the fight that if you score a knockdown, you go to the neutral corner and you stay there until I tell you to come out. And they're also instructed that if you come out of the corner before the count is up, I'm going to stop my count and put you back in the corner. So that's the reason that we look over our shoulders to make sure that that boxer is still in that neutral corner. And that's you're spot on with that. And when I completed my count, I noticed he had crept out of the corner. So I just gave him a little push back. I didn't want to push him all the way back. He did have an advantage at that point, but he also wasn't in the neutral corner.
And at that point, so Ryan Garcia, landed the signature left hook. He had Haney hurt. And I think everyone was on alert at that moment. And one thing that seemed to happen at that moment is Haney would hold on very tightly around Ryan, and Ryan would kind of take a step back a couple times. Maybe he'd throw some punches. And there was 2 moments where Haney was holding, and then his knees would go to the ground, and you went in and called it a slip twice. And I'm curious about your thought process there, because there could be an argument either way. And again, we have the benefit of watching this again on replay and replaying it and all of that. So that it's very difficult doing it in the moment, but I'm curious to your thought process in the moment, because if Ryan Garcia is hurting Devin Haney and Haney is holding, and then he's holding to the point where he takes a knee, is there any thought in your mind that could be a knockdown, or do you consider that a slip?
Well, it wasn't a slip. It was more or less, in my opinion, a push to the canvas. Devin's trying to hold on, and Ryan is pushing him off. You can make that argument. It's not black and white right there. But in my opinion, when you go to the canvas from a legal shot, a legal punch, that's a knockdown and nothing less. And I didn't think that those pushes were clean punches, which is why I did not rule it a knockdown.
Right. And then the question comes in, if you land a legal shot, but then a fighter holds or is going down, it becomes a judgment call, which is what you're talking about. And that's the gray area that's so difficult to do in real time that we're analyzing now as we speak. Now, I will say Devin Haney was holding a lot. Now, that's a veteran move that a lot of boxers do. If you're hurt, you tie up your opponent. It's the referee's call if you want to give a warning, if you want to take a point. So at any point during the fight, did you consider taking a point off from Devin Haney for excessive holding?
Absolutely. He got rocked. So here's what's interesting about the round 7 when he was really hurt. He was holding on very tightly. He had a death grip on Ryan. And I was on the verge of giving Devin a hard warning right there. And as I was because I was trying to pry him apart, and he like I said, he had a really tight grip on him. So I have no choice but at the very least to give him a hard warning. And before that could happen, Ryan committed a foul. So and it's a clear foul. It's an egregious foul. So I addressed it right then and there. And I took the point from Ryan. But my mindset prior to that was I'm going to have to warn Devin, because he was the one who was holding excessively.
And as you started to separate the fighters and start to warn Devin, about excessively holding. That's the moment you just referenced, and I think this is probably the most scrutinized and talked about moment in the fight. Was
Right.
when Ryan was being separated. You were separating both men. Ryan landed a shot during the time that you were separating the men, so it's supposed to be essentially a timeout there, and he landed that shot late as you were separating them. You decided in that moment to take a point off of Ryan Garcia for that shot while you were separating them. Why did you decide to take the point off versus just giving him a strong warning?
That's a blatant foul. And when you have blatant fouls like that, I think they should be addressed. Now, in fairness, that's a judgment call. I felt in that moment, at that point in time, I didn't want anything to go off the rails. I had given both of them a real serious talk in the dressing room about flagrant fouls. And if they did occur, do not retaliate. I will handle it. So, that one was not in the gray area. That was black and white. That was a clear, flagrant foul. And I felt I needed to address it right then and there.
And at that moment, as you did that, a lot of people who have watched this back have made the argument, hey, wait a minute, Ryan Garcia had the clear advantage at that moment. He knocked his fighter down. He was continuing to hurt his fighter. How would you respond to folks who say, hey, wait a minute, you're taking away an advantage from a fighter there who has the clear advantage at that moment? What would be your response to that?
I would say he took the advantage from himself by committing a flagrant foul.
And it really just goes back to shots like that. It is a judgment call, but in your mind, you felt it was flagrant enough to take the point off, and it is the referee's discretion. At the end of the day, these are calls that referees have to make in that moment. And that was your thought process there. As we were talking about to start that series, you were thinking about giving Devin a strong warning, and that's actually how that started. Was there a later point where you gave Devin Haney that strong warning for the holding, and did it ever get close again to maybe taking a point off from Devin for holding as the fight progressed from that point onward?
Well, from my memory, I don't recall. Now, I haven't rewatched the fight as of yet. I've been a little busy. But they were both guilty of holding to some extent. Devin, whenever he would get hurt, and Ryan, we talked about the wrapping around the head, the neck earlier. So that was just managing two guys holding. So you saw me quite a bit in this fight, getting between those guys and trying to pry those guys apart from one another, because it wasn't just one way. Both guys were guilty to some degree of holding. At times, one more than the other, but they were both doing a certain amount of holding. So, you just have to manage certain bouts in that moment where both guys are guilty of the same crime.
As the fight progressed in round 9, and you mentioned you haven't watched it back, so I'll do my best to refresh your memory. There was another moment where Ryan did turn to the side, and this time Devin Haney, I think it was 3 or 4 right hands to the side, or even a little bit to the back. But again, this is based on Ryan Garcia's positioning. This time you allowed him to continue to do that. So this time, did you feel like those shots that Devin Haney was landing to Ryan Garcia's side were in that legal scoring range, more of the side, more of the kidney versus the back? Was that your thought process there?
It was. And also on top of that, I had told Ryan a few times not to turn your back. Don't turn your back. So there were a couple of things there. Yeah, I thought it was in that legal zone, but Ryan was also warned about not turning his back. Now to really stretch this, and obviously I have enough common sense in this game after all of these years, but that could be interpreted as a boxer abandoning the fight. When he turns his back that far, that could be the interpretation. Obviously, I knew better. I knew he wasn't abandoning the fight. He was doing quite well, but that's just one interpretation that you could extract from that situation.
And to be clear, what you're talking about is, for example, when a fighter wins a fight, it's announced unanimous decision, majority decision, TKO, KO, whatever it is. One of those items is winner by abandonment. And abandonment means you literally turn your back and essentially almost walk away, where you're saying, I don't want to fight anymore. It sounds like what you're saying is, even though that is part of the rules, you were sure that, obviously, especially with Ryan Garcia landing knockdowns and things like that, there was no moment in your head where you thought that he was trying to abandon the fight. That was just a defensive tactic that he was doing. Is that right?
Correct. Absolutely. I knew he wasn't abandoning the fight. I'm just giving you a hypothetical.
Right. Okay. Yeah, no. And that makes sense. So as the fight continued, round 10, Devin Haney was dropped again. And I wanted to ask you, we could hear on the broadcast, you warned both guys on holding, and you did say, don't turn your back. So just, as that fight progressed in that 10th, 11th round, things like that, you mentioned that, you did give both fighters those warnings, in terms of holding, and then telling Ryan not to turn his back. In your mind, were you thinking at all that this is going to just continue to be warnings, or did you think that at some point you may have to take a point off from either guy for any of those violations? No,
I thought at that point they would just be warnings. And sometimes when both guys are committing infractions, as referees, sometimes we have to make an adjustment and get in there maybe a little quicker than we intended to, because we want to prevent those things from happening, So yeah, by that point in the fight, no, I didn't want to deduct any points from anyone at that point. Sometimes as the referee, we have to make the adjustments.
And you have to make adjustments on the fly as the referee. In round 11, Devin Haney was dropped again by Ryan Garcia. And I'm just curious if you do remember that 11th round, because obviously a referee's job is, you want to protect a fighter from himself. And if a fighter is hurt, you don't want anything tragic to happen in the ring. But at the same time, especially a fighter who has a title and things like that, you want them to have their opportunity to come back. Was there a moment at the end of the fight at any point where you were thinking about stopping the fight and giving Ryan Garcia a TKO win?
I knew Devin was really hurt. I knew that. So obviously those thoughts are, at the forefront of your mind. We have to protect the fighter's safety. You bring up a good point in terms of the magnitude of the bout and the type of fighters that these two guys are, as you've illustrated earlier in this interview. So with certain fights, you allow boxers, you give them a little bit more leeway than you would the average fighter or 4-6 round fighter. You know what I mean? You grant them a little bit more rope as a champion and top challenger, or two champions. You might give them a little bit more rope than you would the average boxer. I give you an example.
Sure.
I did the Terrence Crawford Errol Spence bout, and I thought I had waited about as long as I could to pull the plug on that fight, because you can make the argument in that fight that bout could have been stopped a little bit earlier. But as a champion, as a champion amongst champions, I thought that the boxer deserved more leeway, like I said, than the average boxer. So, and that's something that I've evolved in my decision making over the last maybe 5-6 years. I'm practicing that patience, understanding those nuances of the game, understanding when you're given that mandatory 8 count to really utilize that 8 count to help you really accumulate your decision-making process. So yeah, I've evolved a little bit over the last few years when it comes to that. And, are you always going to get it right? Absolutely not. We're human, but I try to get them right all the time.
It's, as other referees have said, you want to let fighters get into the deep water, but you don't want to let them drown. And that's really the key, especially as we look at fighter safety and things like that. And it's a fine line to balance. You mentioned Errol Spence, and there's interesting. You could even have some similarities there. Errol Spence came into his fight with Terrence Crawford undefeated, rarely had been hurt. Same thing could be said for Devin Haney coming into this fight, and it's, you know, in the Errol Spence fight it was stopped. In this case, it went the distance, so it's a judgment call in the moment. With everything we've talked about with this fight, you now have the benefit a little bit. They say hindsight is 2020. You have the benefit to kind of look back. I know you haven't rewatched the fight, but you have had time to speak to people and think about everything that went down. As you look back at Devin Haney versus Ryan Garcia, is there anything that you would have done differently as your job as referee for this fight?
I don't believe so. I you know, for all the negative publicity that may be out there, I've also received a lot of calls from my superiors who thought I handled the fight well. So the point in saying that is you're never going to please everyone, you know. So you go in there and you make the best decisions you can make at that point in time, and you live with that. In this particular fight, no real regrets. No regrets at all, I should say, when it comes to that. Let me say, that was a very difficult fight to officiate. Like, you know, when you have a lot of fights where both guys are obeying the rules and everything is smooth, you look good. But when you have those really tough bouts where both guys are bending the rules and at times breaking them, those are very difficult. And as you mentioned, you have to make a lot of decisions in a very short time frame. So, yeah, they're not easy to do. They come with a certain amount of pressure. There's a big spotlight, and the decisions you make, yeah, they're going to be scrutinized. But no matter how you rule, someone's going to be unhappy. So, you know, that's just how it goes, you know.
That's just the profession that you chose is going to be heavily scrutinized. And to your point, you know, there's a common saying in boxing, like the referee's doing a good job if you don't say his name or hear his name. But when fighters are doing things that do require a third party to get involved, like holding or turning your back, or hitting someone later, things like that, a referee is going to have to get involved. Or even if there's a knockdown or whatever it is, a referee is going to have to get involved in those moments, just to ensure a fair playing field. And so your perspective there makes a lot of sense in terms of the decisions you made in that moment. And I think, as we were talking about earlier, the biggest moment probably to be most scrutinized outside of the, you know, holding and things like that was the late hit on Ryan Garcia. And you mentioned folks reach out to you and spoke to you about your decision making. I'm just curious, could you also, since there is a subjective nature to a shot when you're separating the fighters, I know you're calling it a flagrant foul, but that kind of moment, there is some subjectivity in terms of how flagrant that foul is and whether it requires a strong warning versus a point off. And so if you do hear people who say, hey, wait a minute, that should have been a strong warning, not a point off, do you understand where their thought process might be coming from, even though at the end of the day, you decided to make a different decision, and that's your call as the referee with your experience as a referee in that moment?
Well, listen, you know, these are great areas we're discussing. So I'm not speaking with what's the word I'm looking for, with 100% certainty that this is the right way to do it. Every situation is different. At that point in time, I felt that was the right decision, but I'm not standing saying this is an absolute and this is the way it's always got to be handled. There's a lot of factors that you take into account, you know, but no, there's never any one way to skin a cat, as they say, you know. So, but I tell you what I will do is, and which I do all the time, is I watch my fights when I get time and see where I can learn from. See, okay, I did this well, but I could do this better. You know, so, and then, like I said, I discuss these things with my superiors and they give me their feedback. I'm not going to say what my superior said to me here, but yeah, we've discussed this. I don't want to say ad nauseum, but, you know, they asked me about it. I gave them my opinion. A couple of superiors were in agreement with it. A couple were not. that's but yeah, I discuss it and I look for ways to always improve. And I think as referees, we're always looking for ways that we can improve, no matter how long you've been doing this profession. There's always ways to improve, and the decision making is probably the most crucial. What did you decide in that moment? What were you thinking in that moment? Like I tell you, over the last 4 or 5 years, some thoughts of mine have evolved about the sport in terms of certain types of bouts, certain fighters. I've evolved a little bit, and you can probably go and find fights I've done 6, 7, 8 years ago where I stopped bouts before I even gave a count. I saw a guy get knocked down really hard, no count at all. So I've evolved a little bit when it comes to how I officiate, and I don't plan to stop evolving.
You mentioned the folks that have scrutinized performances, the folks that have reached out to you in a positive light. You've spoken with superiors. There is so much pressure in being a referee, especially for fights of this magnitude, because you are affecting these people's lives and their livelihood in terms of if a fighter wins or loses. There's also the aspect of safety, fighter safety. If the wrong decision is made, that could affect a fighter and his family in a negative way as well. So there's just so much pressure. With this fight and everything that's happened since, does it change your mindset or feeling or anything towards refereeing big events? Or are you, is this just another day in the office and you're ready to get right back to it in terms of big name fights?
As long as my superiors are satisfied with my performance, I'm happy. But I was satisfied with the performance anyway. And what I mean by that is not that you get everything right again, but it was a very difficult fight to officiate again. And those are the fights where you really have to, challenge yourself and make sure you don't affect the match too much. Those are the bouts where you really have to see where you are as an official.
And it's there's a measuring stick there, of course, to be had. So with this fight and everything that's come out since in terms of people having an opinion one way or another, I'm just curious, you've been in this game for over 20 years at a professional level. Is this the most talked about fight that you've refereed in terms of a reaction and things like that? Is this the all time in terms of that aspect of it?
In terms of reactions, I would say yes. But this is a strong social media era. And when I got started, the social media wasn't quite as strong as it is now. So who knows? Maybe there were fights 15 years ago that wouldn't have been as scrutinized as much as it would be today. So, yeah, this is the era that we're living in right now. And and it's not necessarily a bad thing. Everyone has an opinion. To a large degree, that's a good thing. But in some ways, it has its negative kickbacks.
Certainly. And obviously we're living in the social media era and people are going to be vocal about their opinions, whether they think you did the right thing, the wrong thing, or even things beyond that. And we've spoken a lot about all of that with this fight. So just to wrap it all up, as you look back at this fight, I know you haven't rewatched it yet, but you will. But just off memory and everything else that's going on with this fight in terms of the speaking with your superiors and reaction and things like that, how would you grade your performance as a referee? How do you feel like you performed overall when you look back at Devin Haney versus Ryan Garcia?
I was satisfied, but let me turn that around and ask you as a spectator. How did the fight look to you overall? Not necessarily me as an official, but overall, the event, the fight itself. How did it look to you?
Yeah, no, I thought it was a really brilliant main event. I think one of the great things was that this fight delivered in terms of a lot of eyeballs from, let's say, mainstream sports fans or people from that aren't generally just the boxing mainstream, the boxing hardcores, I should say, tuning in. There was a mainstream audience to this, and this fight delivered. We had knockdowns, we had action, and I think that's what's most important. In terms of decision making, like I said, it's so easy for us to sit back and, watching on the couch or in the arena and say, hey, I would have done this differently, versus these two men in the ring and these things happening in real time. It's almost like in baseball, like a bang, bang play. This is like a series of bang, bang plays, and you have to make a decision. And in terms of 10-9 scoring, those decisions do matter. So if you're, and if you're going to ask me about, even specific moments in this fight, I have the benefit of hindsight and watching it over. So if for me personally, I would say that, for example, Ryan Garcia hitting late, I think that could have been maybe a hard warning at that moment instead of a point taken off. But like I said, you've explained yourself and you had to do it in that moment. So I can understand why you're saying that. That is a judgment call that you have to make in that moment. So I completely understand that. I think that it could have been a warning. At the same time, folks that are upset about, let's say, the advantage of the momentum being taken away, that momentum would have still been taken away with the warning. And with that said, I think that Devin Haney, I think the holding at times got very excessive to the point where some of the push downs could maybe even be, you could argue that, hey, those were caused by damage, so they could maybe be a knockdown, or an excessive holding call could be enforced in that time. You mentioned that you were thinking about excessive holding before Ryan Garcia's late hit. So again, this is all, hindsight is 2020 looking back, but those were kind of my thoughts as I look back at this fight.
Can I? No, I respect that, and you make very valid points. I appreciate your perspective. Those are good points. Let me play devil's advocate just a tad on
Please.
the knockdowns that weren't scored.
Sure.
So just to play devil's advocate, this is just a little fun, just hypotheticals, right? If I'm boxer A, let's say in Ryan's position, and the ref does not score a knockdown, right? But I know he's hurt. Do I want that down boxer to receive a mandatory 8 count from a knockdown, or do I not want that time because I want to jump right back on him and get him out of there? I might want to jump right back on him. So I might be glad he didn't rule it a knockdown, because the knockdown, we're just talking points. But you can also look at it like he also has time now to recover. And if he's really hurt, as he was, then I have a real shot at getting him out of there.
It's a great point on your part, and I get exactly what you're saying, because if you knock down a fighter, they're going to get a count, they're going to get time to recover, versus if they have to get right back up, you don't even have to go to a neutral corner, you can continue your momentum. And I guess to play devil's advocate to that devil's advocate, I guess I would say I understand that, and then at the same time, though, I think those points are critically important as well. Right. So Correct. You could also say getting that point for the knockdown could be so beneficial to the scorecard, especially in a fight like this where the scorecard was so close. I think that would probably be my first kind of retort to that. And the second thing you could also argue is that if you are hurt, let's say in Devin Haney's case, we're using him as an example, and these are all hypotheticals. If you are hurt and you do, let's say you took damage, you were holding to such a degree that you went down, and that is called a knockdown now. As the fighter A, this case, Ryan Garcia, steps away to the neutral corner. Now that fighter, in this case, Devin Haney, in this hypothetical, has to get himself up. And that could take energy to do so as well. Even though they do get those 10 seconds to do so, that could maybe even deplete some energy there. But we could go round and round in circles and hypotheticals all day. But that's, that would be my kind of, my retort there. But I also hear, obviously, from your point of view. And so, look, these are things that are going to be talked about for a long time. And in any big fight, there's going to be, especially a competitive fight, especially a close fight. And as this was, there's going to be things like that that are said. I think at the end of the day, when people see, hey, one fighter knocked a fighter down 3 times, you think about, oh, wait a minute, that fighter should have won in runaway fashion. But if people who watch boxing know that boxing is scored round by round, and there's
Right.
it doesn't matter in terms of just those rounds, it matters what's done round by round. And so that's why the scorecards ended up being where they were. I think people are happy and understanding with the decision of Ryan winning, because it did seem like he overall did more to win, and the scorecards did reflect that. So I think that's kind of, the overall feeling of this fight. So and so just to close it out, you presented everything that was in your mindset, and we talked about the reaction for this fight. I'm sure you've read some of it. I don't know how active you are on social media, but if you haven't seen it directly, I'm sure people maybe said, hey, these are the things that people are saying on social media, things like that. So would you have I want to make sure part of this interview was for you to be able to speak to the general audience and give your side of the story and everything. So would you have a message to fans and people who watch the fight? What would you want to say to them?
Well, the only thing that I would say is myself, and I think I speak for most officials, is that integrity being questioned is so far out of bounds and so strange. If you really know me and know my passion for this sport, like to assume that I would favor any boxer over another is just so strange and bizarre to me. I love the sport, and I'll continue to love it, and not really giving 2 cents about who wins and who loses. So I think that's it. So anything other than that, those are all opinions. And I'm not that active on social media. So that's probably a good thing in this sense.
And, you mentioned your passion for the sport, and that is clear, especially for someone who's done this at this high of a level for as long as you have. To be clear, of course, we're going to see you back in the boxing ring soon, I'm sure. You're excited and looking forward to continuing your career as a referee, I'm sure, right?
Oh, absolutely. I'll do this until the states no longer want me. I'll put it that way. Yes, or I'm just too old to do it. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for giving your insight and going through even moment by moment. It's, I think anyone who has questions about the refereeing in this fight can at least now get a chance to hear your thought process, and you laid out your thought process on each moment in this fight. So I want to thank you for chatting with me. I want to thank you for breaking it down. And, I wish you the best of luck as you continue your career as a referee. And I'm sure we're going to see you in a big main event sometime soon.
Oh, thank you, Curran. I really appreciate it.